Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing the Volstead Act. Why are we discussing this? Well, I'll get into it here. I thought of making this video after reading a recent article from the Pattaya Mail, that's pattayamail.com. Article is titled, Thailand's Days and Nights as a Weed Haven Now Look to Be Numbered. There seems to be a lot of sort of sensationalism out there across the board. I get it. The press is the press. They have to do what they have to do. And in the clicky world of the internet, you have to attract clicks. I get it. It's part of the business model. But I don't necessarily think that cannabis just sort of going up in smoke, as it were, is as likely as, it's sort of been made out in a few different media outlets. That said, this is quite a nuanced article, and it's very good. As usual, Pattaya Mail tends to put out really good stuff. It's one of the reasons they're kind of a go-to place where I'm looking for information about what's going on. But let me just get further into this. Okay, quoting further, a leaf could also be borrowed from the Volstead Act of 1919, which introduced the prohibition of alcohol era in the United States. It's worth noting that Volstead criminalized the production and distribution of alcohol, but not the actual drinking of it. Applied to Thailand, this would mean that the police emphasis would be on the producers of cannabis rather than the customers. Well, also, the Volstead Act and the entirety of prohibition is basically one giant example of complete jurisprudential mismanagement of a social issue. Okay, the Volstead Act was a byproduct of a constitutional amendment to the United States Constitution, which prohibited alcohol. It created a period of time in the United States called Prohibition. I'm having a hard time keeping a straight face while I'm making this video because my producer he was unaware that I was making this video, and he's now laughing to death because, quite honestly, Prohibition was a massive failure. On so many fronts, it's not even, I could go into the myriad ways that it was a total failure. There's a good argument to be made that although it might not have created organized crime in the United States, it certainly bolstered it, because when alcohol became illegal, all of the big gangs got into it. I mean, that's how the commission in New York was created. If you go back, I mean, there's a film, it has, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. If you go back, Christian Slater. There's a movie with Christian Slater, I think it's called Mobsters, which is, it's like a 90s movie where they get into, Charlie Lucky Luciano and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky, and how all of those guys came together and, basically took over the illegal liquor rackets, amongst other things, and thrived, basically. I mean, it caused the mob to thrive in the United States. And in fact, arguably cutting away Prohibition probably did more harm to the bottom line of organized crime in the United States than maybe anything else that happened in the 20th century. Same time, making liquor illegal also, again, bolstered that same entity at the same time. So, point of this video, I do not think it would be a good idea for Thailand to look at Prohibition as a possible template for how to deal with cannabis. Quite honestly, I think they were doing a pretty good job. The last government was doing a pretty good job on this until there was some sort of political kerfuffle. I still don't fully understand it. From what I've read, it seems to have something to do, on the one hand, there's issues pertaining to the way alcohol licensing works in Thailand, and there are political actors who support changes to that. Meanwhile, there are political actors who are supporting these changes to cannabis laws in Thailand. My thinking is, perhaps a transparent regulatory structure for both things and a deregulation in terms of alcohol might not be a bad thing for smaller producers. I haven't done a lot of videos on that, but maybe I will moving forward. But one thing I know for sure, having a pretty deep understanding of the history of American law, which literally is the definition of jurisprudence, Prohibition was a jurisprudence nightmare. It was a nightmare for American law. It was not a good move. It clearly, this is where you get the quote from FDR, upon the repeal of Prohibition, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Yeah, pretty much, because prohibition's almost kind of similar to like COVID insofar as there was, especially through like the Women's Christian Temperance Union and things, they whipped up a lot of kind of hysteria against the demon rum or whatever. And then meanwhile, here's the mob with open arms saying, yeah, make it illegal because, all the better for us, sort of thing. Again, not an example in any way. In fact, it's probably the opposite of an example. It's exactly what you don't want to do when talking about regulating what was once a controlled substance or having an uncontrolled substance that becomes regulated. Perhaps a better way to deal with it would be, one, tax it. I agree with that completely. All of these this notion of a tourist tax and these other things. Pretty sure you can get, Thailand can get the money it needs out of cannabis taxation better than it can get out of much of anything else that's currently I can see out there. And also, create a transparent regulatory structure. Again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. You sell the kids, that's a crime. You're doing real time for that. Jail time, as you should. And again, there should be rules and regulations pertaining to it, but this notion that we should take a page from the Prohibition Handbook, no, that's been proven historically to have been a gargantuan failure.